All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to First Tuesdays. Welcome here for the first time, if it is in fact your first time. We're really excited. It's being in the middle of election season, and we have a couple guests who have been through this a few times and have a few insights and stories to share. And we're, of course, glad all you guys are here to offer up questions and commentary as well. I am Mick Dumke. I write for ProPublica, Illinois.
And I have been Joravsky from the Reader and WCPT Radio, 820.
All right. And with us tonight is Kitty Kurth, and you identify your, did I say your name right?
You've said my name right, yes.
As a guy named Mick Dumke, I'm trying to be sensitive about
Kitty Kurth is pretty easy. It rhymes with earth.
There you go.
And it's kind of like Katie Couric, who used to be my editor back in the day.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Didn't I go there?
Yeah.
when we had real news. Not fake news.
Gotcha. I think we probably still had fake news in some kind then, right? But Richard Nixon thought so. All right, anyway, moving on. And with us also is Alderman Rick Muñoz, who has...
And you got that right.
Yeah, I did. Good. I'm really on a roll here. And, you know, Ben introduced himself, so no one yet has had a chance to massacre his name, but that usually happens, right? Jaworski. What are the other variations?
Jaworski, Joravsky, everything, you know. I've long since stopped trying to correct people. Whatever you want to call me is good.
I just got him in here as Ben J.
Yeah, Benny J. That's all. Benny J.
I'm just never sure, like, how good of a day it is. Should I call Rick or Ricky or Ricardo, you know? It all depends on what kind of a mood he's in.
Rick's fine. Rick's fine. To some people, that's Mr. Alderman.
Yeah.
Well,
you can
I've
call me
known you
Rick.
since before
Yeah,
it
you
was
can call me
Mr.
Rick.
Alderman,
Yes.
so.
All right, well, I have to say
I
this.
still have AOL addresses for Ben and Rick. I'm just saying.
At least one of them still uses it.
I still use my Rick Muñoz, he's been the alderman of the 22nd Ward since I want to say 1993.
Yes.
And he's heading out into a great new future. He's not running for re-election. So first of all, congratulations,
Thank
Rick.
you, thank you.
You made it through without being indicted.
Wait a second. There's a few months left here.
The average is one alderman a year.
Is that right?
The average, that end up under the microscope of the Fed.
All right, well, one alderman in particular is under that microscope. We'll get to that one. We'll get to that one. So I usually, Rick, I always tease Rick. I just had him on the radio show. I tease him. You know, he is the David Axelrod of the Southwest Side. He's always making deals and going off the record. Now that you are finally, you will no longer be an alderman, and you can't be held accountable for things that you say or opinions that you show, will you be going off the record less now as you head off into the future?
I'm going to cease being alderman. I'm not going to cease being in politics. So no, I'm still going to be on the record.
But will
On and
you
off
be
the
on
record.
the record?
Yes,
Will you
I'm
be
be on
on
and
the
off the
record?
record. Yes, depending on the issue.
That was kind of
That was
a flip flop.
I'm talking to Dodge there.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of, sort of.
So wait, so what is your future going to be?
Right now, I have no clue. I know I want to teach at some point with some friends in academia, but I think I'm the only dummy. I'm the only idiot that's retiring before his pension kicks in. Because I've got the years with the city, because I started with the city back under Mayor Gene Sawyer. A long time ago, when I was a mere 22 and a half, 23. And so I've got the years in. I'm just not old enough to get my pension. So I think I'm the only dummy, so I gotta get a real job.
Yeah.
So how many years before your pension kicks in?
2.5.
That's not that long.
And
And speaking
I'm
as a
53.
political professional, not a government professional,
Yeah.
just so you know, there are no pensions for political people, so, you know, 2.5 years doesn't look that long.
But I still got, as we were talking on the radio, I still have about good 20, 25 years of fight left in me. Then I'll retire.
All right, well, you know what, let's ask this question since you brought it up. How are the taxpayers going to pay for your pension once you start collecting it for 2.5 years?
That is a fiduciary relationship between me and the city. That is a contract, so they can't touch it.
I
Well,
understand.
actually, since you mentioned that, William Daley who is running for mayor of the city of Chicago, gave a speech about a week ago. I forget which city, I think it was maybe, I can't remember where he is. He was downtown, it was
I
to
think
a
it was the city.
city club, and one of his first points was that we need a constitutional amendment to strip from the Constitution the language that protects pensioners and enables then the city and the state and the Board of Education, whatever, to renegotiate pension contracts and take away.
It's, you know, do you get to renegotiate your marriage contract after you get married? Like, that's just wrong. Like, you made a deal, we made a deal with people who came to work for the city. You can't say 10 years later, oh, you know what, that's, yeah.
Going forward, maybe. Going forward, you'd have, they already have the multiple tier pension plans.
If it's
Going
the
forward.
deal you make with somebody the day they're hired.
When you get hired, yes.
Well, that's almost a necessity.
Yeah, but Bill's
right?
got a snowball telling chance of winning anyway.
All right, let's get, let's get to that. You do not think, the name is Daley, all right? And it works two ways, I understand. There's some people I know, probably sitting at this table, who would never, ever vote for someone with that Daley name. But then there are other people who
Are you
sitting-
talking about 4 people sitting at the table?
I was talking about one person in particular sitting at this table. But then there are other people who see the name Rick and Kitty, and it's just like automatic. So I gotta think, you guys got a chance.
Automatic what?
To automatic vote for, they see that name.
So I've known Bill Daley for a long time. I like Bill Daley, but I would probably never vote for him. Because every time, and this is really as a political professional more than a voter, because every time that he has said he's gonna run for office, he starts a campaign, he hires people,
Raise a little money.
he raises a little money, he makes it impossible for those people that he hires to get a job on another campaign because he ties them up. Then he waits just long enough to say that he's not running so that everybody who's been working for him is screwed. So that's just, that's an insider's perspective.
But you started it right. He's a Daley. So as much as you think some folks are automatically Daley voters, I believe there's more Daley haters because of the brother and his own track record. You know, he's a corporate lawyer.
Yeah.
His narrative is he's a corporate lawyer.
But Rick, Chicagoans have never shown the ability to go into a voting booth and vote for someone other than Daley, when there's a Daley on the ballot.
That's actually not
Okay,
true.
Vic.
1983.
Yeah.
1983, in the Democratic
Yes.
primary of mayoral election, Richie M. Daley actually came in third, as I recall.
Yes, he did.
So there we go. That's the exception
He
that
was
proves
third,
it.
right? Okay, I'm just checking with Rita behind us.
Oh, yeah.
She's got a better memory than I
Yeah.
do.
Against an incumbent mayor, all right.
No. Against an incumbent member, and the number one vote getter was a certain congressman from the first congressional district of Chicago named Carol Washington.
Wow, yeah.
So, anyway, the one time, the only time that
Once, all right.
was on the ballot. So, you don't think that he'll be one of the two in the runoff?
I do not believe that. I just don't think that there's enough traction.
Where does, I mean, what, okay, there's still 21 people in today. Did anybody drop out today that I missed? Anybody, I was in Wisconsin for part of the day. Somebody might have left.
Nothing happening in Wisconsin right now, by the way.
No, nothing. I'm trying to help up there because they need help worse than we do, but, anyway, where does he get his votes from? Like, who, like, anybody? I mean, Bridgeport is still good for a couple, but he hasn't even lived in Bridgeport, like, since he was a kid. He's lived in Saguenash forever and then downtown.
Well, Rich Daley didn't live in Bridgeport either, and kept getting reelected.
At
Right.
least he was close.
Oh, wow.
He was like walking distance, biking distance from Bridgeport.
Okay, so we're on the north side, most of us here are are white people. Where do Northside white people, where are they gonna vote? Who are they gonna vote for?
Okay, amongst my cadre of Northside white people friends, looking at a couple of you in the audience right now, they like Lori Lightfoot.
Yes,
Yeah.
they do.
Right? I am undecided at this point, but most of the people that I would have considered part of like the Harold Washington Coalition back in the day, way back before half of you were born, sorry. I think a lot of them are Lori Lightfoot people, then maybe their second choice would be like Tony Preckwinkle. I don't know.
Listen, Bill Daley made that announcement at the City Club regarding the constitutional amendment to cut pensions for a reason. And I think that reason was a strategic one, to win over the support of the Tribune's editorial board, to win over Crane's, to win over corporate Chicago. And I think that he's probably emerged as corporate Chicago's candidate, and that'll get you a lot if you're coming. All you gotta do is get to the runoff, right? So all you need is what, 20%?
If you're a Daley, don't you kinda need the northwest side and southwest
The
side
bungalow belts.
bungalow
The
belt
bungalow
people?
belts.
You just
And
gotta get to the
Those
runoff.
people are the people that work for the city of Chicago.
Well, who voted for Rom? I mean, that wasn't just the
Well, Rom
bungalow
didn't-
belt, that was like basically the whole north side.
Yeah,
But
you're talking about
Rob,
like,
my-
and much of
my-
the south
my
side, for
problem-
that matter.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. My problem is just with the pension bit.
Mhm.
Like, if you're saying to the city workers who would likely be your supporters, oh, by the way, I'm not gonna safeguard your pension, that seems stupid to me.
yeah, no, it's a valid point, yeah. But I think,
Politics, I was taught politics is addition, not subtraction, but different people have different views.
yeah. Well, I know that Rom got roughly 75 to 80% of the vote in like in the 43rd Ward of the north side of Lincoln Park, 42nd Ward. And I don't know about the 44th Ward, but he got a lot of votes. I don't know if it was that high. So my guess is that's,
He won every white ward. I think maybe the 49th ward, my ward, may have gone for Chewy, but otherwise, I think he won for every single.
Well-
He won every single white ward.
With all due respect to Chuy Garcia, who I've also known for a long time, he talked about running for mayor for many decades, and in many decades, he might have been able to run a really good, solid, hard-hitting campaign, but I don't think the last time around was a really good, solid, hard-hitting campaign. So it's not just that they voted for Rom, it was also that there wasn't a good alternative.
well, we have on stage a guy who had quite a bit of a role to play that
Well,
came
I
in
mean,
with-
He wasn't the candidate.
I'll grant you that the campaign was a little haphazard, because it was a last-minute campaign, because he wasn't supposed to be the
Right.
candidate. He was
Exactly.
recruited 15
Exactly.
days before the filing deadline. And in those 15 days, we were able to get 40,000 signatures, raise a decent chunk of change, and move the needle on a number of issues. And he wasn't able to put it together because there wasn't the time.
And I
If we
applaud
had an
you for
extra
all
2
that.
months.
You did a great job with the time you had, but if he was serious about running for mayor, he should have started a year before that. I mean,
We
quite
weren't.
honestly.
We weren't serious about,
You just said it. You
I
just
said
said it.
but because it wasn't in the
It's
plan.
okay.
It
I
wasn't,
get it.
yeah,
I get it.
I'm trying to hold back a little.
I know,
He's
go
trying
for it,
to,
man.
but I'm trying
I
to
was
just
gonna
go
say-
on the record.
It
Yeah.
wasn't in the plan to do it in 11, in 15.
Yeah.
Okay? But people got out of the way, some people got sick.
Opportunities presented themselves.
Life happens, and we went after it, and now
All right, well, let me-
we will forever have marketed the mustache.
Yeah, you market the
And
mustache.
he pushed a sitting mayor into a runoff. I mean, that was no small thing, right? I mean, didn't that, even in losing, it said something about about Rom's fundamental political weakness, didn't it? I mean, this guy was not untouchable. I mean, I think it had a huge impact.
I think it actually probably figured strongly into the mayor's plans for this election.
Right.
All right, now let me ask the two of you this question here. Coming out of Chuy Garcia's campaign, I like to say that was the first time that like the progressive voice, whatever progressive means, really emerged in a mayoral election, well, since Harold Washington died. And so right now, very curious thing, Kitty, where every candidate running for mayor is calling him or herself a progressive, pretty much. I'm not sure if Gary McCarthy is, but pretty much every other mayor. Maybe Gary McCarthy said he wouldn't have closed the mental health clinics, which is a progressive position to take. So,
Is Paul Dallas running as a progressive?
Trying.
yeah, I think Paul Dallas is running as a progressive as well. I mean, he talks,
That's
he too
interesting.
talks about not closing school. I mean, so here's what I'm getting at. What are the progressive issues as you see them that a progressive mayor would be championing in this campaign?
And let me add to that, to both of you guys. Is progressive holding certain ideologies, or is it the style of governance? Is it being an independent and an outsider? Is that the same thing as being a progressive?
Well, I'm gonna quote one of my friends who I was with earlier today, our mutual friend Jeff Smith, who said, you know, there's a fine line between independent and unaccountable. So, which I thought was like a great way of explaining things. That said,
Okay, wait.
I think, go back.
Unpack that just a little bit.
Well, I think that progressive is not just independent. I think progressive should be a set of values. I'm gonna actually like phone a friend or go to the audience and say, what do they think a progressive candidate, what values do they think they should have? Because I think if you ask 5 of us, we'll probably have a
Five
set of
different
answers,
answers.
but 5 different sets of answers. But I think, you know, transparency. If I got my start in politics when Harold Washington was mayor, and I would never have had the career that I've had without his style of governance, which was, if you had a good idea, you could walk into City Hall and have a meeting with somebody and get somebody to listen and get something done. And transparency. And the notion back in the day, you know, it was revolutionary when Harold Washington looked at the city budget and cut it into 50 pieces for 50 wards. Like, that hadn't been done before. So, I mean, I think there are some basic tenets of progressive government that have made their way into even the way our city is governed today. But we've got so much more to go, and I think transparency and accountability for the people is huge. And I applaud the sitting aldermen who do the budgeting, where you meet with the community, and I'm just spacing.
Oh, you're talking about
Participatory.
Participatory, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. Participatory budgeting.
What would you put?
Which is not what it's all cracked up to be, but we'll go back to
Yeah,
that.
but
Yeah,
it's, you know,
it's good.
there are many ways you can do it. It's
Yes.
at least a step in the right direction to let citizens have input.
I'm not even gonna begin to try to define the term progressive, because like Kitty said, everybody's gonna have a different perspective, different angle, different set of answers, when it comes to what is it to be progressive. I mean, we're all pro-choice, right? Does that make us progressive?
On that issue, right?
Yeah. But, so some of us involved in this next upcoming election are basically defining it as supporting certain things that you will do once you get to the city council. This is for all the mandate candidates that want to call themselves progressive candidates. Comprehensive police reform, beyond this consent decree, in terms of the training, in terms of the accountability with a sort of more accountable process, not CPAC, but something closer to that, a hybrid, where you have some resident management of the police department, of the accountability of the police department, so that we can reform this paramilitary organization that we have today. So that's number 1. Number 2, TIF reform. But for this TIF, this project is not gonna happen. That was a 1980s rule when Harold started using TIFs in the city of Chicago. You know what I mean?
Making sure Ben hasn't ascended into heaven already here.
But for this
Yeah, I
TIF,
heard
this
that
project
Ben
wouldn't
had
happen.
knowledge about
The
TIF.
but-for clause.
Yeah.
If it doesn't apply, the TIF shouldn't be used. Shouldn't be.
Does everybody knows what a TIF is here?
Kind of,
If not, Ben could tell you, and there's several articles that you can
Yes.
look at on the radio.
So, number one. Number two, it's a little crazy, but I'm throwing out there that there should be some sort of city income tax, especially for the commuters. Because a 1.5% to 2% income tax on people that make over $125,000 a year is about $400 to $500 million of untapped money. And this is mostly commuters.
Yeah, wait, so time out, you would slap an income tax on people who work here, not just live here?
Who work in the city of Chicago. Who make more than $125,000 a year, that's the math.
I see.
So,
Well, leave me out. Go for it, man.
yeah.
We also live in the city.
Yeah.
so-
No, but you would have the tax on anybody
Anybody who's working in the
of
city,
Chicago.
who lives in Schaumburg.
Have you seen any
lives in
study on
Naperville.
how much that would raise?
1.5% on 125 plus is about $500 million, 500
$500 million
a year.
You don't think that's a jobs killer for all these companies who wanna move here?
Everybody calls it a jobs killer. Do the jobs die?
Well, I don't know.
I mean,
We
every
don't-
time we
don't
have
have
that,
income
okay,
tax.
let me ask Scrub.
What does it work, how does it work in cities where
Wait.
they've implemented it?
Wait, time out. Why would it be a jobs killer?
Because the jobs, McDonald's would move back to Oak Brook. Tech companies who want to invest here would put their headquarters in Oak Park or Evanston instead of Chicago.
But everybody wants to be in Chicago
So that the people don't have to
anyway.
pay the head tax.
So
Why
let me
do they
finish.
care what
So
their-
those were 3 points. Let me-
Why
let me get
does
to point
McDonald's
4 and 5.
care about their employee paying a
Because they have
tax?
to, because they have to attract employees, and they have to be,
They want people who, they've moved into the city because
Every
people wanna
time
work
there's
here.
a
but
debate
do
about
people
the
still wanna
minimum
work here?
wage or an income tax increase, everybody calls it a job killer.
Yeah.
Do the jobs die, people?
No.
No.
has there been, I don't know what big city has implemented a head tax and how it's worked
Not
in
a head
real
tax,
place.
it's an income tax.
It's
Well, it is a head tax, because you're talking about for people who don't live in the city.
No, it's for everybody who works
For
in the city.
everybody,
in the city.
everybody who works in the city. But if you live in the suburbs, so if you live in the city and work in the city, you have to pay it. But if you live in Naperville and work in the city, you also have to pay it.
Well, no, the notion that it was a job killer, which came from, I think Ron was the one who got rid of the head tax, if I'm remembering this correctly, was that if you charged businesses a certain tax for every employee they had, that would deter businesses from being in the city of Chicago. They would go to Schaumburg. That was the notion.
That was a head tax on the business.
Yes, so what I'm saying is if you tax the people who work in the city of Chicago, why would the employer care if it's,
I don't know, that's why I'd like to see some data. That's why I'd like to see.
Isn't that more regressive than actually taxing the business? This is a progressive
Yeah.
thing and you're actually passing it on to the employees. Anyway, go on to your progressive list. Rick.
So number 4, an elected school board, okay? Bottom line, okay? And I'm forgetting what number 5 is.
I don't know, but you're on a roll, I'm
Yeah.
taking
No,
notes.
I think for housing people, housing, affordable housing.
No, I'm assuming we're all good on choice, I'm assuming we're all on affordable housing, I'm assuming all that stuff. These are 5 things.
Tenants for
Specific
Specific
progressivity.
things.
Legal weed.
Legal weed.
Well, that's what
I
the
think
state.
that's, I think
That's
we're
what the
gone
state-
on that, like, that's,
So
we're there.
my point being that I don't wanna fall into the trap of defining being progressive as an ideology. I want, when folks are coming to me and saying, hey, Rick, I'm thinking of running for alderman, can you support me? So you do this, or this. I don't know about that. Then don't knock on my door.
And what's progressive for an aldermanic candidate, like the 5 issues that are progressive for an aldermanic candidate, might even be different than the 5 issues for a
A mayoral.
mayoral candidate, and are certainly different than
Oh,
the
number
5
five, number five,
issues
number
for a
five.
senate candidate.
Number
5, a municipal bank,
Yes.
okay? We need to institute a municipal bank for a couple of reasons. One is because social justice starts with economic justice. And number 2, weed is unbankable.
Right.
Right
That-
now, in the
that's
state of
right.
Illinois.
So what
For
do
federal
you
banking.
mean specifically by municipal bank? Explain that.
A non-for-profit, municipally guaranteed finance institution that serves as a depository for different industries, weed being one of them, because we will not be FDIC constrained, because we're self-insured. and then uses that cash flow to create affordable housing programs, to create, help seniors, to help forgive mortgages for seniors, to help forgive some student debt. Because once you create that sort of cash flow as a well-run bank,
Okay, well run.
Yeah.
So who's gonna oversee this
But
bank?
you're
The
talking
mayor and
about
the
like-
alderman of Chicago?
You're talking
That's gonna be
about-
well run?
You're talking about more like the North Dakota model, the public
Yes.
bank, a public bank.
a public bank.
Which operates for the good of the people rather than for a profit motive. So it can offer
Well, the profit goes
lower-
back.
Right, and it can offer lower rates to people for things like student loans and mortgages, and doesn't have, you know, better credit card deals, all kinds of things.
Now, Rick, you
But
laid
it's
out.
overseen ultimately by
No,
the
there's
mayor and the
a,
city
well,
council.
it would depend. The way it's worked in North Dakota, they have a banking board that oversees it. They're
Who
banking
appoints the people to the
professionals.
banking board?
I think it's the governor, but I don't know, it might be the legislature.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad idea, I don't know, it just has to be vetted, but ultimately, you know, you create another
We should,
institution that has the same accountability
for the
questions
next,
as every other city-run institution.
For the next panel, we can have Alderman Pilar come and explain it. He's got all the details, but he's onto something.
Well, no, it's a great, look, it's like
Alderman
anything
Pilar
else.
running for
Running
city
treasurer.
treasurer, and this is
And-
one of his.
Whose petitions have been challenged, by the way?
And I think
Alderman Pilar's petitions.
Amara Enya, who's running for mayor, is
Also,
also, has
yeah.
a big, public bank that's part of her platform.
Okay, now listen, putting aside Mick's objection to the city running a bank. Let's
I
just
don't have
put
an
that-
objection, I'm just
or his
asking a
questions
question.
about it, okay, right.
He had a
All right.
smirk on his face.
Yeah,
when
he had a
asked
smirk
the
when he said it,
question.
so I take the question as an objection, but whatever. Putting that aside, everything you said, it's very practical, I think, pragmatic. And so my question is this, now you're leaving office, you can tell the truth.
You mean I've lied?
No.
I don't lie, I pivot.
Pivot, right?
It's that off the record
It's that
stuff,
Tony
right?
Preckwinkle pivot that you're so good at. Why haven't any of these things been implemented in our lifetime? Why something, down the list of things, well, I guess the income tax would be very controversial and difficult, but why the fierce resistance in the city of Chicago to any of these initiatives?
I'm gonna put it on its head, not fierce resistance, lack of constituent mobilization for those issues. You know, times change, Ben. You and I have been around for a long time, but a lot of things that, you know, we weren't able to pass 20 years ago, we're able to pass now. And it's because constituents have to ask for it and demand it. And if and when they do, elected officials will respond. Elected officials are not the most out front people. Sometimes we've got to push them into positions. But I think now there's a lot more will amongst the people for ideas like this.
I mean, we've been trying to work on some of these already, but you're correct, there is some opposition to some of these ideas. But the important thing that we have on February 26th is that with the mayor not running for re-election, with the anti-incumbent sentiment that's out there, and with the narrative that young progressives are getting more engaged in electoral politics, I'm hoping that the fact that Election Day is the fourth Tuesday of February, which is always statistically the coldest day of the year, that they'll stay engaged, because it gets kind of cold on February 26th. That way we can move people.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of like the story I was telling you the other day, where, you know, 1996, 97, then Alderman Preckwinkle and I introduced an ordinance basically saying that if you do business with the city, your employees should not be making a minimum wage. We call it the living wage ordinance. That was
Should not be making less than.
Less.
should not be making the
Oh,
minimum
should be
wage.
making
Should be making
more.
more.
than.
More.
Got it.
And we called it the living wage. It was kind of innovative, kind of crazy, kind of lefty.
Yeah.
But now everybody's talking about 5 to 15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just moving the needle, it takes a while.
Okay, now just think about that. And this is, I say this all the time, in 1996 this was true as well. This is a left of center city. And this is a city, and even it's, since 1996, this has been proven out in every single election, that goes overwhelmingly Democratic. And yet, our leader, our mayor, has consistently been conservative in his outlook. I would say Republican in his outlook. Just that last, the vote on the police academy, where Chance the Rapper came in and chastised the city council, and it was 49-1, I believe, or 47-1 against 42. Oh, okay. Sorry, man, I forgot. I thought it was just Carlos.
How quickly Ben
So,
forgets.
you know, why there's so much resistance? How come conservatives have controlled Chicago, a city that is filled with progressives?
When are the elections? February 26th, coldest Tuesday of the year. Why are they separate from the state primaries, the national primaries, as the national midterms?
Because they want low turnout?
Yes, and why, the city of Chicago has been trained to expect their aldermen to be housekeepers. We pick up the garbage, we trim the trees, make sure the lights are on, and make sure the snow gets plowed. People are trained that way.
Did you forget your primary responsibility? Potholes?
Oh, potholes. We
Come
are,
on,
80%
come on.
of what I do, 80% of my job is a housekeeper. I deliver garbage cans, for crying out loud. It doesn't take a PhD. But people are.
Yet some have failed that particular course.
So-
Maybe it was because they had a
So wait,
PhD.
but how does any of this,
So what we're talking about here is we're talking about legislation. We're talking about actually talking about policy, which is, in my book, only about 10% of the job.
And also, Ben, I would posit that, you know, where we stand depends on where we sit. And I think that if you talk to people in the rest of the country about their perception of our mayor, whether it be Daley or Emmanuel or anybody for the last 15 years, I think that people in other cities would say, oh, they have a liberal Democratic mayor.
Well, on national issues,
Right?
that's, you know, true.
I'm not sure,
true.
I'm not sure with Ron, it has a reputation of being mayor 1%. So he may have
Not
shaggy.
in cities outside Chicago.
No.
When you travel around the rest of the country, people think Ron is a lefty.
Well, maybe Trump Republicans think he's a lefty.
No, I was just over at the NLC, the National League of Cities in LA, a couple of
Yeah.
weeks ago, and they think that way.
I mean, House Democrats see him as a superstar still, right? He's the
Right.
architect of the last time, previous to this, that the, you know,
That we
Democrats
won the
took
Demo-
over the House, right? So he's been using, you know,
You
riding
need to
that
get out more,
reputation.
Ben.
guess
We're
so.
gonna have to get a van for Ben and do like a 12-city tour so that Ben can go around and see what's going on. in
I have a
our
hard
city.
time I'll just, for the benefit of this conversation, bow to your wisdom here.
Have you
But
been
I
to
have
the
a hard time.
Democratic convention in the last?
No, I've not been at
12,
a Democratic
16 years?
convention since 1984.
Okay, well, I will say that having participated in these gatherings, our mayors and our city is always looked at.
All right, we'll
as-
put that aside. In the city of Chicago,
Yes.
Mayor Rahm and the people of the city of Chicago get to vote for the mayor, not some people who live in Philadelphia and think he's the second coming of FDR. And I'm not even conceding that point. I'm just moving on. All right? People in the city of Chicago get to vote for mayor, and the people in the city of Chicago know him as Mayor 1%. And we pretty much knew back as recently as like 2012 and 2013 that he was to the right of where most of us were, and they reelected him.
But Ben,
And-
every Democratic president, including FDR, was elected with the help of political machines like the one in Chicago. There's always been this, you know, we're liberal on the national stage, but when it comes right down to it, we want the machine to churn out the votes for us. That's
And-
always how it's gone.
And let's talk about what you were getting to, or you were getting, I think Rick was getting to. And just to be clear, I don't hate Rom, but I've never worked for Rom. I'm feeling a little bit like an apologist here, which my real life friends will think is kind of funny. But just like, what was the turnout in the last municipal election?
Dismal. Yeah, I forget what it was.
So
It was like 30%.
what was the turnout in the most recent midterm election? Pretty high, right?
Well, higher, but yeah.
Pretty high. People vote when they are pissed off. People vote when they don't like something. Everybody who stayed home, pretty much those were also votes for the status quo. You know, people come out and vote when they're mad. If people really, really, really didn't like Rahm, they would come out and vote against him.
Well, they also vote when they feel like their vote is going to do something, when it's gonna matter. I mean, when they're, you know, Rich Daley, every election won with larger margins and a smaller total vote, every election. And so it's just like this shrinking number of people kept reelecting the same guy each time. But there, you know, with a few exceptions,
Opposition.
yeah, there weren't very strong candidates running against him. Can we talk a little bit about who's running in this race? We started to a little bit. Can we handicap a couple candidates here? You talked about Lori. Who else is in? Who else is just going nowhere?
I refuse to make, anything I say tonight will be predicated on the fact that people may or may not be on the ballot. So first of all, let's talk about our whole crazy petition process, which seems insane, except that I believe, and I'm gonna try to get the Alderman to give me some backup on this, I think that the petition process is the first test of a good campaign organization.
Correct. I
And
totally
if you
agree.
can't get good valid petitions and you can't recruit enough volunteers to help you do petitions in a legal, lawful, and organized way, probably you're not gonna have a great campaign.
That's correct, yes.
All right, is that indicative of not necessarily being able to govern? Is that what you're suggesting? I mean, who cares whether you have a good campaign or not? That's, you
Well,
know,
if you can't run a campaign, how are you gonna run a government?
well, is it a question of not running a campaign or not having the money to pay people to get good signatures?
I don't see the
No.
I've never seen the correlation.
Well, you've never put together a petition
No,
drive,
and
and you've
no,
never
I-
been a candidate.
And that's true, I've never run a
People get
government.
kicked off they get kicked off the ballot
For
for not
having shitty-
lacing their petitions.
Okay.
Binding.
Find it.
Okay.
Have you read the candidates rules? Like, it's all in there.
No,
This
you
is
don't.
not hard. It tells you exactly what to do. And if you can't follow directions to get on the ballot, how are you gonna be
All
a
right.
good legislator or mayor?
You said this to me on the radio about 10 days ago, and so I went out and read the manual. I said, oh, man, kid, he's gonna
Did you
have
read
trouble.
the state manual and the city manual, or just the city?
Because you're really doing it, come on.
You know?
Well, because here's the deal.
Yeah.
The city manual, which is available on the Chicago Board of
Right, that's
Elections
the one I
website,
read, yeah.
it's 20 pages long.
Yeah, I read that
It'll
one.
take you 15 minutes to read, because a lot of it is table of contents. But those are the rules. I'm serious. I am dead serious here. We do a lot of candidate training, and if a candidate walks in my office for the second time and hasn't read the rules, he's never walking, or she are never walking in my office the third time.
Well, you know what, I'll tell you this right.
Let me
Okay,
finish.
go ahead.
There's two sets of rules. The city rules are for how to get on the ballot. The state rules are for money. All your filings and how you raise money, how you can spend money, how you have to report it. These are things that someone running for office, someone who's gonna govern us or legislate, I think should be able to do.
All right, I just want to point out one thing that Ricky had pointed out to me today, that
Oh, great.
he's the master of the process, he's kicked more people off than anybody else, and he's the
According
mentor
to
of people-
Ricky.
According to Ricky. And I love him too, he reminded me that in 2007, William Doc Walls, I had forgotten this, had Richie Daley on the ropes on a petition challenge. And the big issue came down to, can you print your name or do you have to sign your name? And everybody thought you had to sign your name, and the board ruled in favor, no, printing is okay. So what I'm saying is that rules in this case are meant to be broken. They're interpreted by hearing officers who generally hold their job because they make the right rulings. And so I do not think there's a direct correlation between your ability to get on the
You
ballot.
also need
If you- wait,
12,500
if you have-
signatures.
Yes, but if you have 12,500 valid signatures that your volunteers went door to door, talked to registered voters at their doorsteps, which is not that hard to do. It requires organization, it requires volunteers, but if you have to have people to believe in you if you're gonna be a good candidate. It's not that hard to get the valid signatures. I was running Paul Tsongas's campaign back in 1992. No one knew who the hell Paul Tsongas was. We were running against Bill Clinton, who had lined up, thank you, Reagan, half of Arkansas, the Shaw brothers and Danny Davis and everything else.
You're
and
talking
all
people
Park
literally
Ridge.
from Arkansas.
Literally from
Yeah.
Arkansas. And people who went to high school with Hillary. I literally had 2 elected officials in the state that would endorse Paul, and I called all of them, literally all of them. I went down the list. But I managed to get 25,000 valid signatures in 3 weeks in December when it was cold as hell. It's doable.
But notwithstanding the technicalities and the archaic system we use to weed out the bad apples, when somebody comes into my office and says, Rick, I'm thinking of running for this, or Rick, I'm thinking of being an LSC member, or a state rep, or an alderman, I always start with this. Close your eyes. Imagine it's Wednesday after Election Day. You won. What are you going to do differently? If they can't answer the question right there, right on the spot, then I won't even engage in a petition conversation. I won't even engage, because folks need to know that they're running not because they hate the incumbent, but because they're gonna either believe in this, believe in that, do this, do that, but close your eyes. Imagine it's Wednesday after Election Day and you won. What are you going to do differently or better?
You know, you have to have a sense of why you're running and
And
what purpose.
I have a similar process, but more like yours. When somebody walks into my office and says they want to run for office, I ask them, why are they running? And if they can't answer it in 3 sentences or less, then I make them go home and do the exercise, write down all the reasons you're running. If it's 10 pages, that's fine, but we're gonna edit it down so it fits on a 3x5 card, so you can have that conversation with the voter at the door. Or so that when Mick or Ben call you up and say why you're running, you don't stumble like Ted Kennedy did.
Oh my God, 1979.
In 1970, yeah.
79.
I was gonna say 3 sentences, that's tough. I mean, Bill Clinton, what was his first keynote speech, like 2 hours?
But that's why it wasn't the keynote speech. It was when it was,
It was. He
yes,
was the
it
keynote speaker
sorry.
in
It wasn't, it
1988.
was before he was running, was my point. By the time he was running, we got him way down to about 1 hour and 40.
All right.
But the 3 things from that campaign that people remember, which were the core parts of his message, it's the economy's stupid. Don't forget about healthcare and the bridge to the 21st century.
I thought you were gonna say the definition, what the definition of is.
That
is,
was
but that came
after-
later. That came
that was
later.
later.
Sorry.
But remember, I worked for Paul.
All right, so based on what you just said, you're not gonna feel sorry for Susanna Mendoza when she's knocked off the ballot?
If her petition, if the signatures aren't valid, I am a big progressive. I am a big supporter of women candidates. But I have my rules, and if you can't, we tell people what the rules are to get on the ballot fair and square. Whether the rules are fair and square is another deal, but everybody has to follow the same rules. And if you can't get over that first hurdle, forget about it.
What about you? You gonna feel sorry for Susanna Mendoza if she?
Oh, hell no. No, Susie and I go back to when she was a campaigner, a staffer, to then Alderman Frias, that was indicted under Silver Shovel. She was staffing him, managing a campaign against some of our friends in the 12th Ward of progressives that were running, trying to unseat Ray Frias. And she was actually the person who signed the challenge against Dion Miller Perez, God rest his soul, because he passed away last summer. As Dion was candidate, and she was the actual objector. So for her to try and hide, like, oh my God, they're beating up on me. Oh, come
Like she
on,
doesn't know
please.
the game.
Come on, please.
How long
And
has she been in office?
she ran in '98 and lost, then ran in 2001 for state rep, and then the trajectory, she's never really had a real race.
But my point is, if she's been in office that long, shouldn't she have 3,000 volunteers on her list? Shouldn't she be able to ask those 3,000 volunteers to each go out and collect 10 signatures? This is not rocket science, it's organizing. Community organizing 101.
The other reason why I wouldn't shed a tear if she were not talked about is because she was known down in Springfield as Electric Susie. Because she wanted, for example, a piece of legislation she championed was if you're in a car and passenger B commits a crime, or the driver commits a crime, you in the car are culpable of that same crime, not an accessory. Not because if they commit murder, you're up for murder one. She wanted to give the death penalty to all these folks. She's a lock them up and throw away the key kind of state rep. She's scary.
She was then.
She
Times have
argues that
changed.
she's changed. All right,
But, we have to point out, Rick, in fairness, you and Tony Preckwinkle have been allies for a long time. I don't know if you're
Yes.
formally on board with the campaign.
We have
Explain this to me already. He's not formally endorsed.
We have not
or-
endorsed, but I am being helpful to the campaign.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, all right, just want to get that out
Let's get
there.
that clear.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask this question then for both of you. And I get this all the time because, like Mick, I'm constantly being bombarded by people who work for the various campaigns. And when they look at me, they go, I want to try to convince this guy that my candidate is the most progressive of all the candidates in the race. And like this happened, the same thing happened in the governor's race, same thing. And so they would all try to convince me, and usually the way they try to convince me, Kitty, is to tell me how bad the other person is, okay?
The
So,
apple.
yeah, so it's like, for instance, his candidate, or excuse me, not formally, Tony Preckwinkle, when the
His
Susanna,
associate.
when the Susanna Mendoza's people want to turn me against his candidate, they'll tell me, Ben, you know, she was in bed with Joe Barrios, okay? That's what they use
In a
against.
manner of speaking.
Yeah, metaphorically, of course, yeah. And,
You
Yeah.
just really grossed me out.
and so.
Aim for clarity here.
Susanna Mendoza, I always hear, you know, she got her start with HDO, she's a Madigan person.
I thought she was a Burke person.
Burke and Madigan, it's a twofer with her. And
I
so,
represent both.
all right, so here's my question. Nobody, with the exception of the people sitting at this table, are pure in Chicago politics.
Just to be clear, I have no candidate in the race, but I am really, really looking forward to hearing different ideas talked about. And Ben, I know this is your show and Mick's show, but I have a request.
What's that?
Could we do a straw poll of who people
We'll
would be
do the
audience
straw
like?
poll, but I want to ask you this
Okay.
question. How long is the statute of limitations with any of these candidates in terms of their bad old days? Because when it comes to me, hardly any of them are from the good old days.
Was it the aforementioned Earl Washington was a product of the machine, right? His dad was a precinct
Yeah.
captain.
Yeah, he himself
for-
got a start.
For
Yeah,
Daley,
But he
yeah.
broke from it, and he had a formal break the way
Ralph Metcalf.
that none of these candidates have had, where he just made an announcement that you cannot trust it, it's over, patronage is dead.
But the point is, these people
Okay.
involved, including the
So-
person who's.
So how long? How long? What do we need to say?
I think it is politics is art and science. And I think that it's the art of politics, not the science of politics. I think there is no number about when the break is.
Yeah.
I think you have to be artful and no messaging and no language like Harold Washington did to get away with it.
And just to agree with Kitty and take it a step further, it's all about the narrative,
Yeah.
okay? It's all about the story
And
of
they
the
have
candidate.
to, yes.
How you tell the story and how you beat down the negatives. I mean, I'm guilty. I've cut my deals, okay? Guilty as charged. But
That's why we call you the David Axelrod South to the side.
But I can point to 5 grammar schools, 1 high school, 2 libraries, a police station, and 2 fire stations that got built in my 25 years, all in the same neighborhood. And that's just the bricks and mortar. Not to mention the CBOs, community-based organizations we created, not to mention the affordable housing. I mean, I can still safely say this, I'm the only alderman that will only allow 2 units per lot. If you're a developer, and you come to the 22nd Ward, and you own 3 lots, and you wanna build 12 units because you wanna do some condos, you know not to come to 22. Because 22, we only do 2 units per lot. For a couple of reasons. One is to de-densify the neighborhoods, which just have overcrowded schools. And the other reason is to prevent gentrification from sneaking in, okay? I say that because, going back to the story of closing your eyes, governing is what we do between elections. People need to know. And so, my narrative started as the gangbanger alderman. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
I got arrested a couple times as a kid. I had it expunged, but it's still, I put it out there. When I became alderman, I said, hey, look, I got arrested, I made some mistakes. Big deal, I put it behind me. So my opposition for the first 4 elections, 95, 99, 03, and 07, always called me the gangbanger alderman. After 07, they got tired, they said, okay, we're never gonna beat them.
That didn't work, let's try something else.
Yeah, let's try something else.
By the way, what you just said may be an answer to the question I asked before. The question I asked before is how can the city of Chicago, which is the most liberal city in the world, keep electing mayors who are these conservative Mitt Romney types? And I think, in all due respect, the answer you just gave, you know, you got this school, this lot. Mayor Pawar says a very similar thing in the 47th Ward. I was so happy when he won. That first 4 years, he was dreadful. He was doing Rahm's dirty work going on Channel 11 with Will Burns to put the spin in for Rahm. The 2 of them, I love them dearly, but man, yeah. Anyway, but he would go, Ben, I got this school, I got that school, this thing, that thing, the other thing. And everybody is cutting their individual deals with the all-powerful mayor, and they get this school, they get that school, they get this street, that street, and guess what? You know,
It's yes, yes, yes.
we don't, we don't have TIF reform.
Okay.
We don't have the
How
municipal
many-
bank. We don't
How
have.
many people vote for their alderman based on neighborhood issues, and how many people vote for their alderman based on city issues?
That's a good point.
It's all neighborhood.
It's
It's
all
all about the
neighborhood.
neighborhood. I tell my captains, when they're knocking on the door and getting signatures to put me on the ballot, just look around. There's the school, there's the new alley, and we just fixed that sewer. So when the neighbor says, what have you
And
done?
the street light over right in front of your house, you probably fixed that too.
Yep. So, it all boils down to the housekeeping.
And as a result, our legislative branch is a housekeeping branch,
Yeah.
right? That is one of the issues here.
Listen.
All right, we need to get some questions from the audience
yeah.
here.
Oh, my
and
goodness,
we didn't
the
even
time
bring
is-
up
yeah.
a certain alderman whose office was raided this week.
Oh,
But
yeah.
maybe somebody else will.
Someone ask that question,
So,
please.
Yeah, right here.
So, I'm seeing this at the national level, and I'm wondering how much it goes down to the city level. I know hopefully, it seems very far away, 2020 presidential election. We have someone who presumably could be a front runner, Kamala Harris, most likely going to be running for president. She has a history as a prosecutor, and that's turning a lot of progressives off. Do you see the same happening in the city where younger progressives might be turned off by something like that? I like her, but I'm wondering specifically about Lori Lightfoot, where she was a federal prosecutor. Do you see those kind of criminal justice reform issues bleeding into the mayor's race at a local level? Specifically as it concerns that
Great
kind of
question.
prosecutor record.
Did everybody hear the question?
Yes.
Okay, so Lori Lightfoot, as it pertains here, Lori Lightfoot, she was a federal prosecutor at one point in time. She's worked for previous administrations, including both the Emanuel administration and the Daley administration. So does that rule her out as a progressive? And whether, again, she meets whatever this ambiguous, amorphous definition of progressive is, what do you do with that narrative thing? Like maybe that's another way to look at it.
It goes back to the other devil in politics, which is money. That narrative is only as good as how many times you can tell it on radio, TV, and in the mail. So if one of the opposing campaigns wants to make an issue over prosecutorial history, and they've got the money, they can't. It's kind of like what Rom did to Chewy really early by defining him as the guy that doesn't know how to fix budgets.
Which is ironic coming from Rom, just
Yeah.
a punt, you know.
So it goes back to, like I said, the other devil in politics, which is the money, to be able to tell your story. The question is a great question. Should we vote for people with a litmus test? And, you know, I think I said it when I was explaining how, a little bit about my history, but no, because we sometimes make mistakes. I'm not excusing Lori's prosecutorial history, but who knows? Maybe
For the
she-
record, being a prosecutor is not quite as much a mistake as being a gangbanger.
Well, I was gonna say,
Depends what you,
I
where
guess
you
it
well,
was-
yeah, well, that's
sit,
the
where you
argument.
sit.
So we're gonna
Where
say
you
that there
sit
should be
is
no
where you sit.
prosecutors? Like there
Right.
should be no prosecutors, and anyone who is a prosecutor, like, you know, what about progressives whose family members or themselves are
Yeah.
victims of crime, and
What
she all
if
put
you-
them away? I
you
mean,
know,
we shouldn't do
What
that
if you
anymore?
don't like doctors? Should there
Yeah.
be no doctors? I mean, I'm pretty sure that we shouldn't have a litmus test for candidates, except those petitions, but I'll stop talking about them.
All right,
Alderman, what are you going to be teaching our youth that you said you want to get into teaching, based
Oh.
on your history of your life?
I have a curriculum, a syllabus on 3 topics. One is communications, which is how to tell your narrative, how to design it, how to pivot from pesky reporters. The other one is actual government management, and then the third is politics, how to do the petition, how to get elected. So those are 3 classes that I've taught before at different universities. Right now, my resume is floating out there. I'm not looking for work, but people know that I'm looking for work.
Also at the 1988 Democratic Convention, was the same convention when Ann Richards spoke. Also, what happened with Ed Burke.
someone had asked that
Yes.
question. Ed Burke.
He became alderman when I was 4 years old.
So don't blame Rick. All right, so what's your theory as to what the feds were looking for?
I don't know, I was gonna tell you about the night I had dinner at Ed Burke's house and
Yeah, we wanna hear that.
he played the piano and we all sang Kumbaya. And,
Literally?
Literally, and we shall overcome, and we shall overcome, swear to God.
Really weird.
So,
No Danny Boy, no nothing,
Danny
Irish?
Boy was earlier, but yeah, Aaron Freeman took me as his date. Kevin knew, my husband knew, it was all on the up and up. But yeah, and I used to go to, like, Ed Burke goes to my church in Wisconsin, which is also like weird because I see him in other places. But, anyway.
Ed Burke goes to church in Wisconsin?
Because Ed Burke has a summer house at Powers Lake where Danny Rostenkowski did.
Okay.
I am on the other lake, the former Mike Royko Lake. We're on the other lake, not the political lake. I know it has better fishing, but, so I understand, I mean, I am not, this is not my part of the political party, but I understand that Alderman Burke has been questioned by the authorities many times during many investigations. That's my understanding, mostly from reading in the newspaper. I am completely puzzled by what this week is about. I think probably the most plausible thing I heard was the airport thing. There's Midway airport contracts. But, you know, in my heart of hearts, do I wish it was something to do with Trump? Of course I do. But that's probably the least
So
likely.
you think it's a contract thing? Rick, what do you think?
The finance committee administers a $115 million a year workman's comp program. And that program, he refuses to allow either the inspector general or the rest of the city council in on its administration. Okay?
And has
So-
successfully kept his colleagues from voting to make
It's
sure,
out.
yeah,
Out
that,
his
that the
purview.
inspector general or
Yeah,
anyone else can
exactly.
get a glimpse.
So, some of us in the progressive, all of us in the Progressive Caucus are supportive of Joe Ferguson, the Inspector General's effort to take over the workers' comp out of Finance Committee, but obviously we don't have the votes to take it from him. There's only 11 of us and we need 26. So the common thread here is the administration of that $100 million that they're after. Yes, Burke has been under investigation before. No, never have they raided his office the way, offices the way they did.
I kind of love the butcher paper too.
Yeah, they just-
But secret of the government, butcher paper is their go-to when we're doing events for the president or the vice president, and we don't have, a budget to put up like a nice drape across a window. The Secret Service makes us go out and buy butcher paper and butcher paper the windows. So I do know that that's the government go-to solution.
Quick follow-up question, Rick. As having seen all this work, I mean, what is the hold that Ed Burke has over his colleagues? Why are other people loyal to him? To those of us on the outside, he seems incredibly aloof and arrogant. I'm just talking about his disposition, let alone the things he actually does. But yet I hear these stories trickle out about, oh, you know, he helped me out, he told me how I could pass something. What kind of a colleague is he, and how does that explain how he's been able to hold on to power?
Mr. Congeniality, on the city council floor when you're first new, and he's trying to curry favor. And he also controls the city council budget. So, for example, if I move my offices and I'm short $12,000 to pay for a new phone system, guess who I have to ask?
And I have heard not only from Rick, but from many other aldermen of many, ranging from conservative to progressive. I've heard that he is like the best friend when you come into office, and he will take you and tell you how things work and help you out. Is that?
Yeah. And if you need a phone system,
He's got you covered.
if your copy machine breaks and you're short $3,000 to pay for a new copy machine at the office.
City council equivalent of filling a pothole. All right.
Question? Can I ask a question?
We'll go over here and then we'll come back to you.
So I'll follow on this sort. Ron was on Morning Joe, MSNBC, it was like 7:30, prime time for Ron, for anyone that wants to get on national television. Last week was like Thursday. You mentioned earlier, oh, great. Should I just start over?
No, go ahead.
Good.
You were talking earlier about the people versus the machine and how people in Chicago, we just, no, Ron, no, absolutely not. But Ron had a national stage, and he made an entire point during his whole 6-minute segment of basically trashing the progressive movement, saying we need to stay center to center right, going back to whole, bring the party together, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is he running?
I would say that's more of a throwback to when he was head of the DCCC. That was his narrative then, and that was his narrative when he was at the White House. You know, he was always more of a DLC Democrat. I think that probably, I don't know why he wanted to be on, I don't know why they wanted him on, but I think probably because they see him as one of the voices for a move back to the middle.
I'm sorry to jump in. He's been kind of doing this for the past year, just
Yeah.
jumping from city to city to city, saying all the great things that he's been doing in Chicago, pushing code on young kids and tech on young kids, and saying, look at all these great things we're doing in Chicago. He's been doing this for like
Yeah, no, he has been doing
He's got a
this.
deal to write a book about how
Yeah.
cities are leading the way,
Yeah.
namely Chicago, so.
But let's not forget, how old is the guy?
59.
Were any of those cities in Iowa or New Hampshire or South Carolina?
They weren't. They were
Yeah.
more progressive and liberal cities.
Yeah. Let's not forget that Dick Durbin is of a certain age. And with all due respect to those of us over 68, 69, maybe 70, Ron wants to be the next Dick Durbin. Go ahead, laugh.
They're not laughing, they're groaning. I didn't hear any
There was
laughter.
no laughter. There was no merriment in the room,
There's no
right?
merriment at the thought.
I don't know this because I talked to him or anything like that, that's just my gut.
Wait, but you think he wants to be president, is that what you're getting at?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, I just wanted to make it
I think-
clear.
I think-
But
What else
but
would he
see,
want- what
well,
else would he
if he
want to do?
wanted to be president, one of those cities would have been in Iowa, New Hampshire, or South Carolina. That's my point.
I think it's clear, we all agree that
No,
he
it's
is.
not early. Iowa is so packed.
Actually,
There's been so many candidates in Iowa, it's not early.
I think we all agree he is leaving the door open for something else. This is not the last we're gonna see of Rahm. I think we're gonna see actually more of him on the airwaves and being out there. Don't you
So am
think?
I the
mean,
only
yeah.
person that believes him when he said to his wife he wasn't gonna run again? Am I the only naive wife in the crowd that thinks like, sometimes your husbands tell you the truth? I have to go
in
to
this
Ben
case,
for,
the answer
actually,
is
I have to
yes.
go to Ben for marital counseling and bring my husband with me, so maybe I'll wait to ask it till the next time. I
But
look
next
at
time
him.
the two of you are on the show,
He's
yeah.
in talks to work for MSNBC or CNN, Rahm is.
Yeah,
That
that's,
would
I
be-
think,
that
Frank's
makes more
absolutely
sense to
right.
me.
I think he's launching a
Yeah.
media career, and he's just keeping that brand name
That's
The
alive.
door is
That's
open,
George
all right, the door is open.
Yes, the next George Stephanopoulos. All
All
right,
right,
so.
we had a question back here, right?
Yeah, so would you comment on the whole Chance the Rapper
comment on what you really think about young people of color voting, particularly for Amara, and more Chance's influence rather than Kanye West, including, the video that he just did on What's an Alderman, wasn't that great?
It was actually factual too.
Yes, but
A little bit too long.
the common wisdom is they don't vote, they don't vote.
They don't.
So, will they vote? Do you think they will vote? And on that note, why is it that Tony Preckwinkle, challenged all the women of color
But-
except
Come
Amara
on.
and
You know the answer to that. Why don't you answer your own question?
Didn't Amara submit 60,000 petitions?
Well, if they're,
I'm guessing she didn't challenge her because Amara had 12,500
all right,
good petitions.
so
Or more.
you're in
She
agreement.
she was challenged.
You're in agreement with Ricky Hendon on that point. That was Ricky's explanation, and I disagree with you and
Ricky Hendon, by the
I am
way, is a
in a-
former state senator, longtime West
Can I-
Side operative, in case anybody
Can I
doesn't
tell
know
a
who
Ricky Hendon petition
Wait, hold on,
story?
before you do, and my theory is, which I think is your theory, embedded in that question, W.
Are you talking about Ken Bennett?
Is that, Tony Preckwinkle's people did not challenge the petitions, not because they were afraid they would lose. You all know that a common tactic is just to tie someone down, even if you think you're going to lose, you keep them from running, you force them to divert expenses that they could use in the campaign to fight the lawsuit, but they didn't want to antagonize Chance and have Chance attack them on Twitter.
I was going way
et cetera.
deeper than that. Chance's dad works for Twitter.
Yeah, I understand that.
I
And
thought it was
so,
so it could be a family thing.
Right.
That says,
Oh, okay.
so
Yeah, let's put him on the hot seat.
Probably had something.
I'm
All right,
sorry.
I'm gonna say one thing and then let Rick give the real answer, but
Not-
60,000 signatures is 5 times, give or take a couple 500, 5 times the number that you need for 12,000. You have to find an awful lot of bad signatures to get it down to below 12,500 when you're starting at 60,000. If Tony's people were also looking at all those other petitions, I think it could also be a lack of resources on her part to be able to do all those challenges. I mean, it's a lot. It takes a lot to find the bad petitions. It takes a lot of manpower, and 60,000 is pretty much challenge proof.
2 reasons. One is she was bulletproof because, yes, they did look at signatures and were only able to identify half of them as bad, which means she still had 30,028 and change, which is still enough to stay on the ballot. And secondly, Chance's dad is Ken. Ken Bennett is the chairman of the Preckwinkle campaign, and Chance the Rapper is Chancellor Bennett, the son. So there's a little family thing going on there. I'm still trying to figure it out, but.
But shout out to Ken Bennett, just for being a dad, because I know his
Oh,
other
yeah.
son too. And those kids, Chance and Taylor, are like really, really good, smart, nice kids.
But-
Not to mention
Now,
talent.
mind you, in January of 1988, when I started working in Mayor Gene Sawyer's Intergovernmental Affairs office, Ken Bennett was my office mate.
Mhm.
We started the same month, working for Mayor Gene Sawyer back then. So our kids went to school together. Little Chance story is Chance had the hots for my daughter. And my daughter said, get away, get away. But that was in grammar school.
But to the second part of your question, about millennials voting, I think going back to that, the vote on the police academy on the west side, I think the message conveyed in that vote, where it was, 47-2, to go with Mayor Rahm and spending the tip dollars on that police academy as opposed to going with Chance the Rapper and not spending it on something like schools or mental health clinics, et cetera, et cetera. That was the city establishment's way of telling Chance and millennials they don't believe he's real, they don't believe he brings votes, they're not afraid of him, and he can say whatever he wants, but they're gonna go the other way. That's my opinion, because 47-2.
What do you mean they're gonna go the other way?
The aldermen and the city council and the powers that be will vote against, they'll go with Mayor Rahm.
What about the people?
Your point is turn.
No, my point is, and it's not millennials I'm talking about, it's young people of color, right? Who don't quote, don't vote, we all say that all the time. And, will they vote now?
I hope so.
Is this enough to excite
So-
people?
so
I mean, is
okay,
Amara
I have
and
a-
Chance, is that gonna get
I have an
people out?
audience question, because I think we have a really smart, kind of geeky audience. Does anybody know what the percentage of, what the turnout percentage for voters under 35 was for Chicago in the midterm? Because I haven't looked it up yet, I'll be perfectly
Someone
honest.
seems to know. Under 10.
Under 10? Thanks, Bob, I should have figured you would have looked it up.
How did you know that?
He looks up this
That's like
stuff.
unbelievable. He knew
So-
that. And by how do we, that's an exit poll, obviously, right? Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
is
That's
it
actually an
analysis
exit
or
poll.
exit? No, it could be analysis.
Well, it's not publicly available how old people are.
Yeah, how people are, so you
Yes.
it's only based
Yes,
on.
it is.
Yes, it is.
It's all in the
No,
voter
she's
file.
absolutely right now.
It's
That's-
all in the
yeah, I had to
voter
put
file.
I had to put my ad, I don't know
Yeah.
why I had to
Well,
do
we
that.
do, but I don't, you can't just like.
No, any campaign
Anyway, all right,
people,
all right.
so
Okay.
wait,
Okay.
here's
I'll
what,
take your
here's
word
what
for it.
mayoral campaigns are doing right now, little secret. They're all looking at who voted, they're taking the voter file, which they, any good campaign should have purchased by now and should have had when they were doing the petition challenges, and they will look at who voted in the city, literally who voted, they don't know who you voted for, but they know if you voted, they know how old you are,
Right.
they know if you shop at Target or not, because they will have matched
When
the
you
voter
pull the
file with.
Democratic or
Yeah,
Republican
and they
primary
will have
ballot.
also
right.
matched the consumer data with the election data. So, they'll know
They've
everything.
reduced us to this thing that they control.
Oh, yeah. Don't even try. Like, don't worry about Facebook, because your shit is all over everywhere.
All right, let's take one more question and then I think we're gonna have to wrap up.
I want to do the poll, we got to do the straw poll thing, but we'll do the question.
All right. Yes, ma'am, back there.
Okay. I'm gonna ask a question on behalf, hi guys, I'm gonna ask a question on behalf of the young African-American Lyft driver I had today. He didn't ask this question, but I feel like he would have. He said, I get into political conversations with these Lyft drivers and I ask them if they vote. And he said, I'd like to vote, but I feel like I'm not informed enough. So I'm gonna bring up an unsexy thing that is, I almost never see discussed when we're talking about candidates, which is I remember the brown line now, falling to the ground in 1977, okay, off of the platform downtown, or off of the tracks downtown. I remember the deep tunnel flooding in 91. So what we don't talk about is what you brought up, Alderman. It should be flipped. Aldermen should be checks and balances in doing the legislating in city council. The mayor is in an executive position. They should be running the city, and they should know who the right people to hire and keep things running and prevent bad crap from happening. So I'd like to see I'd like to get your opinion on who do you think has background like that of these candidates? I mean, I love Amara's policies more than anyone, but I'm sorry, I don't know anything she's actually run. We're not Mayberry. We are Mayberry in some ways, but you know what I mean. We're not Mayberry. We're a global city.
It's gonna be a long couple of weeks right now with the whole petition challenge and circus that's going on, but starting January 3rd and 4th, all the way through February 26th, each one of the candidates is gonna have the need to have that conversation with all the voters, okay? In today's age, you know, the internet gives us access to a lot, good and bad, okay? But it allows candidates with less resources that might not be able to afford TV to be able to at least put their platforms out there so people can just check them out.
Well, their platforms tend to be their policies. So I'm asking Mick and Ben if you would focus on this when you do your.
You're talking about the backgrounds of the candidates, is that what you're saying?
And what their jobs have been, what their records have been.
Well, not just their records, because their records are oftentimes voting.
No, I mean their professional,
What if
their
they
resume.
run, what if they run that's even close?
I hear
to
you,
Chicago?
and I'm gonna disagree with you slightly on this one. I have a different opinion on this. Mick and I have argued this point, I pretty much argued this point with everybody, because I think I'm the only person who agrees with what I'm about to say. 90% of the city of Chicago runs itself. That train you're talking about that fell off, came right after Richard J. Daley. I don't think it was because Michael Belanik was mayor of the city of Chicago that train fell off. When Richard M. Daley, who was supposedly the wizard that knew how to run everything in the city of Chicago, somehow or other they punctured the wall of the Chicago River, flooded the downtown. If that had happened to Harold Washington, if that had happened when Harold Washington was mayor, oh my God, this is Harold Washington. Somehow or other, that got translated into what a great manager our beloved mayor is, that he had some people stuffing a mattress into the wall. So what I'm just saying, it's all about the narrative. And people in the city of Chicago fall for this line that their mayors are these all-powerful, smart beings that know how to make trains run and planes fly and streets paved. And 90% of it would happen anyway. Right, Rick Muñoz?
Yes.
All right.
I don't know who I'm voting for mayor.
So,
I haven't thought about it.
The trains will run if Amara is the mayor. I predict that, all
But
right?
one thing that I'm gonna ask, I'm sorry, it's not either of your papers, I'm gonna ask the Sun-Times, and if they say no, I'll ask somebody else, sorry. But, to do 4 weeks where they ask each candidate to give them 100 words or less on 4 important topics, whether it's, education, economic development, environment, infrastructure, whatever the 4 issues are that they think people care about the most. And ask each of the candidates to submit a 100-word or less answer. Because I think that's the only way we're gonna be able to compare apples to apples in this kind of race. Because when there's gonna be such a disparity between the resources of one candidate and another candidate, otherwise we're never gonna know how anybody feels about this stuff.
Well, that's what the debates will be for too.
But
right?
there
That's
won't
when we-
be any.
All right.
How are you gonna do a debate with 21 people?
Well, there won't be 21 candidates. I mean,
No.
Yeah.
Thanks to your petition
Yeah,
challenge.
just-
I'll have it done.
You made that clear that you don't want 21 candidates.
All right, wait, hold on. While we have everyone here, I want to
think
take
there'll be less than 10
Kitty's
before it's
idea.
over.
We're gonna do a straw poll here
Yeah.
to see who people support. So we should just run down the names. All right, so show of hands. Everyone who wants to vote for Tony Preckwinkle, raise your hand. All right. Everybody who wants to vote for Amara, raise your hand. Everybody who wants to vote for Lori Lightfoot, raise your hand. We got a lot of Lori Lightfoot fans over here. All right, she's doing pretty well. Everybody who wants to vote for Willie Wilson, raise your hand.
Not a Willie crowd.
Yeah, not a Willie crowd. What about everybody who wants to vote for Gary Big Mac McCarthy, raise your hand. Not a lot of Big Mac fans here.
Shocked.
All right, here we go. And don't be intimidated by anything Kitty said. All the people here who are for Bill Daley. Bill Daley and Willie Wilson are tied in this crowd.
That's the headline.
And who else? Who?
Vallis?
Oh, Paul Vallis. Who's here? No? Anybody?
Gary
No.
Chico?
Gary Chico. Anybody for Gary Chico? Who am I-
Jamal.
Jamal Green. All right, one.
I would have, yeah.
Wait, who tell me? You're for two. We have two for Jamal. Roger L. Washington. Who beside me knows that Roger L. Washington is he's still on the ballot? Ricky hasn't knocked him off yet.
What about the octogenarian from Roseland? Nobody
Oh,
knows.
yeah, no, that's Clark, Mrs. Clark. All right, Susanna Mendoza is still on the ballot as far as that. One, two, one. Wow. So it's really, in this crowd, it's down between Lori Lightfoot.
Undecided.
Oh, undecided.
How about Catherine?
Someone's undecided. This is why we have an election. All right.
Anybody else that we didn't mention that somebody's for?
Neil
Neil
Sales
Sells Griffin.
No. All right, how many in this crowd wish that Rahm Emanuel was running for re-election? All right. Honest man.
Not because I support him, but I think it would have been a better debate.
You,
Had the original candidate stayed in, challenged Rahm, would have been a narrow, that's the other reason.
okay, all right, fair enough.
Totally against
All right.
it.
How about how many people would have voted for La Riviere?
Ah, Troy LaRob, yay!
There you go. All right.
Interesting.
Who do you guys think will be the top 5 vote getters?
Ah, there we go. We'll start with Rick Muñoz.
If everybody stays on the ballot, it'll be in this order. Tony, Susie, Paul, Gary, Chico, not McCarthy. Those are the top 4.
Oh, Gary, Chico. Yeah, I get you. So, Tony, Mendoza, Paul, Chico, and who's the 5th?
I didn't say that.
Oh.
I said I quit.
Okay. And who do you think?
In the fall of 2016, I told people in many countries that Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president. I refused to make predictions after that time, sorry.
All right.
And that's in the primary.
Yeah, that's the guess. And there'll be a runoff,
And
right?
there'll be a runoff.
So you're predicting the runoff will be Tony versus Mendoza?
Likely.
You think Mendoza will survive the challenge?
No, I said if they're on the ballot.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah.
So then you're saying that it would be Tony versus Paul Vallis?
Yeah, likely.
There you go. There's
All right.
your choice. Enjoy.
Thank you very much.
People will die for you to get the right to vote. Just remember that.
All right.
Say that you were
How
gonna-
about you? What do you think?
They didn't say that you were going to get the right to vote for me.
No, I actually agree with what he said.
Then, so you agree with Rick's list?
If Mendoza's on the ballot, I think it'll be Tony versus Susie. That'll be interesting. Maybe we can have a debate right here at the Hideout.
All right.
Antonio.
We've got to wrap up. Thank you all for coming out. Thanks for all the great questions. Thanks to Kitty and Rick. Really appreciate it.